Question 1. During the evaluation of an organization's endpoint security posture, which process optimization approach for configuration management, patch management, and security baselines would best demonstrate adherence to the principles of continuous monitoring and automated remediation, thereby enhancing overall resilience and compliance? Option A. Prioritizing the deployment of new user-facing features over the timely application of security patches and configuration hardening. Option B. Establishing static security baselines that are reviewed and updated only on an annual basis. Option C. Implementing a continuous monitoring and automated remediation framework for endpoint hardening. Option D. Conducting comprehensive but infrequent manual audits of endpoint configurations and patch levels. Correct answer is C. Implementing a continuous monitoring and automated remediation framework for endpoint hardening. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for robust security posture with the operational realities of a dynamic IT environment. Architects must ensure that endpoint hardening strategies are not only technically sound, but also align with the specific regulatory requirements of the Certified Security Architect (CSA) exam's jurisdiction. The challenge lies in selecting a process optimization approach that demonstrably improves configuration management, patch management, and security baselines in a way that is auditable and defensible against regulatory scrutiny. The correct approach involves implementing a continuous monitoring and automated remediation framework for endpoint hardening. This is the best professional practice because it directly addresses the core principles of proactive security and compliance. Continuous monitoring ensures that deviations from established security baselines are detected in near real time, enabling rapid response. Automated remediation minimizes the window of vulnerability by swiftly correcting misconfigurations or applying necessary patches. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes the protection of sensitive data and systems, and it is regulatorily justified by frameworks that emphasize a risk-based, proactive security posture and the principle of least privilege, often requiring demonstrable evidence of security controls' effectiveness. For a CSA, this demonstrates an understanding of building resilient and compliant systems, an approach that focuses solely on periodic manual audits of endpoint configurations, without a mechanism for continuous verification or automated correction, fails to meet the dynamic nature of modern threats and regulatory expectations. Such an approach is ethically deficient as it creates prolonged periods of potential vulnerability, and it is regulatorily problematic because it often lacks the timely detection and response capabilities mandated by many security standards, which require evidence of ongoing control effectiveness rather than just point-in-time assessments. An approach that prioritizes the deployment of new features over the timely application of security patches and configuration hardening, even if it claims to improve user productivity, is ethically unsound. It places business expediency above the fundamental duty to protect systems and data from known vulnerabilities. This approach is regulatorily unacceptable as it directly contravenes requirements for timely vulnerability management and patch deployment, which are critical for maintaining an acceptable risk profile. An approach that relies on a set it and forget it mentality for security baselines, assuming that initial configurations will remain secure indefinitely, is both ethically and regulatorily flawed. It demonstrates a lack of understanding of the evolving threat landscape and the need for ongoing adaptation. This approach fails to address the principle of continuous improvement and proactive defense, which are cornerstones of effective security architecture and regulatory compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the specific regulatory landscape, a comprehensive risk assessment of potential threats and vulnerabilities, and an evaluation of available technologies and processes. Architects must prioritize approaches that offer demonstrable, continuous security assurance and align with the principles of proactive defense, automation, and auditable compliance. Question 2. The evaluation methodology shows a critical need to integrate threat intelligence into the design of a new cloud-based financial services platform. The certified security architect must select the most effective method for leveraging threat intelligence to inform architectural decisions, considering the platform's regulatory obligations for data protection and fraud prevention. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices for a CSA in this context? Option A. Establish a structured threat intelligence program that includes vetting multiple sources, commercial, government, and open source, correlating intelligence with the organization's specific threat profile and asset inventory, and then translating actionable insights into specific security controls and architectural patterns designed to address prioritized risks and meet regulatory compliance requirements. Option B. Focus exclusively on threat intelligence related to zero-day exploits and advanced persistent threats, APT, reported by highly specialized cybersecurity research firms, and design the architecture to defend against these sophisticated, albeit rare, attack scenarios, assuming that addressing these will inherently cover all other threat types. Option C. Prioritize threat intelligence from open-source intelligence (OSINT) feeds that cover a broad spectrum of global cyber threats, and incorporate architectural controls to mitigate all identified potential attack vectors, regardless of their direct relevance to the financial sector or the organization's specific infrastructure. Option D. Rely primarily on internal security logs and incident response data to identify threats, and only incorporate external threat intelligence if it directly corroborates an observed internal event, ensuring that architectural decisions are solely reactive to known internal issues. The correct answer is C. Prioritize threat intelligence from open-source intelligence (OSINT) feeds that cover a broad spectrum of global cyber threats and incorporate architectural controls to mitigate all identified potential attack vectors, regardless of their direct relevance to the financial sector or the organization's specific infrastructure. Explanation: the evaluation methodology shows a critical juncture in a certified security architect's (CSA) responsibilities, integrating threat intelligence into architectural design. This scenario is professionally challenging because it demands a nuanced understanding of diverse threat intelligence sources, their varying reliability, and the practical application of this intelligence to build resilient security architectures that comply with specific regulatory frameworks. The architect must balance the need for proactive defense with resource constraints and the potential for intelligence to become outdated or misleading. Careful judgment is required to prioritize actionable intelligence and avoid architectural decisions based on speculative or irrelevant threats. The correct approach involves a systematic evaluation of threat intelligence sources, prioritizing those that are reputable, relevant to the organization's specific threat landscape, and actionable. This includes assessing the credibility of indicators of compromise (EOCS), threat actor tactics, techniques, and procedures (TTP), and vulnerability information. The architect must then translate this analyzed intelligence into concrete security controls and architectural patterns that mitigate identified risks. This aligns with the CSA's mandate to design secure systems that meet regulatory requirements. For instance, if the organization operates within a jurisdiction mandating specific data protection measures e.g., GDPR in the EU or HIPAA in the US for healthcare data, the threat intelligence must inform the architecture's ability to withstand threats targeting that sensitive data, ensuring compliance with data breach notification and security control mandates. The ethical imperative is to protect the organization and its stakeholders from harm by building robust defenses based on the best available information. An approach that relies solely on publicly available, unverified threat feeds without a rigorous vetting process is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the standard of due diligence expected of a CSA. Such an approach risks incorporating false positives or irrelevant information, leading to misallocation of resources and potentially creating architectural weaknesses by overfocusing on non-existent threats. Ethically, it is a failure to adequately protect the organization's assets. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize threat intelligence that is highly technical but lacks clear links to the organization's specific business context or threat profile. While technically interesting, this intelligence may not translate into actionable security improvements for the organization, leading to wasted effort and a failure to address the most pertinent risks. This demonstrates a lack of strategic thinking and an inability to connect intelligence to practical architectural decisions, which is a core competency for a CSA. Finally, an approach that disregards the cost-effectiveness and operational impact of implementing security controls based on threat intelligence is also flawed. A CSA must design architectures that are not only secure, but also practical and sustainable. Implementing overly complex or expensive controls based on every piece of intelligence, without considering the return on investment or operational burden, is unprofessional and can lead to an unsustainable security posture. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Clearly defining the organization's threat landscape and critical assets. 2. Establishing criteria for evaluating the reliability, relevance, and actionability of threat intelligence sources. 3. Prioritizing intelligence that directly informs risk mitigation strategies aligned with business objectives and regulatory obligations. 4. Translating prioritized intelligence into specific, implementable architectural controls and design patterns. 5. Continuously reviewing and updating the threat intelligence integration process to adapt to evolving threats and organizational changes. Question 3. Performance analysis shows that the current security architecture of a UK-based financial services firm is exhibiting increasing vulnerabilities and is struggling to keep pace with evolving regulatory compliance mandates, particularly concerning data protection and operational resilience. The firm's leadership is seeking a new approach to design and implement a security architecture that is both robust and demonstrably compliant with UK financial regulations. Which of the following approaches would best guide the development of such a security architecture? Option A. Adopting the Zachman framework as the sole basis for organizing all security architecture documentation and stakeholder communication. Option B. Implementing a security architecture development process primarily guided by the CSA methodology, ensuring it is integrated with the firm's overall enterprise architecture and aligned with risk management principles. Option C. Developing the security architecture exclusively using the NIST cybersecurity framework, focusing on its operational control categories. Option D. Relying on TOGAF as the primary framework for security architecture design, with minimal specific security methodology integration. Correct answer is B. Implementing a security architecture development process primarily guided by the CSA methodology, ensuring it is integrated with the firm's overall enterprise architecture and aligned with risk management principles. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for security architects, selecting the most appropriate framework to guide the design and implementation of a robust security architecture within a regulated financial institution. The challenge lies in balancing the need for comprehensive security with the specific compliance obligations mandated by the relevant regulatory bodies. A misstep in framework selection can lead to architectural deficiencies, compliance failures, and ultimately, significant financial and reputational damage. The pressure to deliver a secure and compliant solution efficiently necessitates a deep understanding of each framework's strengths, weaknesses, and applicability to the financial services sector. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging a framework that explicitly addresses the structured development of security architectures, considering business needs, risks, and governance. The CSA, Sherwood Applied Business Security Architecture, framework is highly suitable here. CSA is a business-driven, risk-focused methodology for developing security architectures. It emphasizes understanding business requirements and translating them into security controls and policies. This aligns perfectly with the need to build a security architecture that not only protects assets, but also meets the stringent regulatory demands of the financial sector, such as those outlined by the FCA, Financial Conduct Authority, in the UK, which mandates a risk-based approach to security and data protection. CSA's ability to integrate with enterprise architecture frameworks like TOGAF further enhances its utility. Incorrect approaches analysis. Adopting a framework solely focused on enterprise-wide IT architecture without a specific security-centric methodology, such as TOGAF, the Open Group Architecture Framework, in isolation, would be an incorrect approach. While TOGAF provides a comprehensive approach to enterprise architecture, its security aspects are often considered a subset or extension rather than its primary focus. This could lead to an architecture that is technically sound, but may not adequately address the nuanced security risks and regulatory requirements specific to financial services. Similarly, relying exclusively on a framework like the Zachman framework would be insufficient. The Zachman framework is a powerful ontological structure for organizing architectural artifacts, providing different perspectives, what how, where, who, when, why for various stakeholders. However, it is a classification scheme, not a methodology for developing an architecture. It lacks the prescriptive guidance on risk assessment, policy development, and control implementation that is crucial for building a compliant security architecture in a regulated environment. Utilizing the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, CSF, as the sole architectural development framework would also be an incomplete approach. The NIST CSF is an excellent operational framework for managing and reducing cybersecurity risk. It provides a set of standards, guidelines, and best practices to improve cybersecurity posture. However, it is primarily focused on the operational aspects of cybersecurity: identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, and does not offer the same level of structured methodology for designing and architecting security solutions from a business and risk perspective as CSA does. While it can inform the security architecture, it is not a comprehensive framework for its creation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach framework selection by first understanding the core business objectives and the specific regulatory landscape. They should then evaluate frameworks based on their ability to 1. Align security with business strategy and risk appetite. 2. Provide a structured methodology for architectural development. 3. Integrate with existing enterprise architecture practices. 4. Address specific compliance requirements of the relevant jurisdiction. 5. Facilitate communication across diverse stakeholder groups. In this financial services context, a business-driven, risk-centric methodology that can be integrated into a broader enterprise architecture and also inform operational security practices would be the most effective. Question 4. System analysis indicates a need to design a new financial services platform that must comply with stringent UK data protection regulations and maintain a high level of security against sophisticated threats. The architecture must be auditable, maintainable, and scalable. Which of the following design approaches best aligns with these requirements, focusing on security design principles like modularity, abstraction, encapsulation, and information hiding? Option A. Expose all internal data structures and APIs to external developers to facilitate rapid integration and development, with security checks performed at the application entry point only. Option B. Implement a flat network architecture with minimal segmentation, allowing all components to communicate freely to simplify development and deployment. Option C. Design the system as a single, tightly integrated application with all security logic embedded directly within the core business processes. Option D. Develop a modular architecture where distinct security services, e.g., authentication, authorization, encryption, are implemented as independent, loosely coupled modules with well-defined interfaces, encapsulating their internal logic and data. Correct answer is C. Design the system as a single, tightly integrated application with all security logic embedded directly within the core business processes. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for a secure, auditable system with the long-term maintainability and scalability, all while adhering to specific regulatory requirements. The architect must consider how design choices impact not just current security posture, but also future development and compliance. Careful judgment is required to select a design that is both robust and adaptable. The correct approach involves a layered security architecture that leverages modularity, abstraction, encapsulation, and information hiding to isolate critical security functions. This design allows for independent updates and auditing of security modules without affecting other parts of the system, thereby enhancing maintainability and reducing the attack surface. Specifically, by encapsulating sensitive data and access controls within dedicated modules, information hiding, and exposing only necessary interfaces through abstractions, the system adheres to the principle of least privilege and limits the blast radius of any potential breach. This aligns with regulatory frameworks that mandate robust data protection, access control, and the ability to demonstrate compliance through auditable components. For instance, regulations like the UK's Data Protection Act 2018, DPA 2018, and the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, emphasize the need for appropriate technical and organizational measures to protect personal data, which is facilitated by these design principles. The modularity also supports the principle of separation of duties, a common compliance requirement. An incorrect approach that prioritizes a monolithic, tightly coupled design would fail to meet these requirements. Such a design would make it difficult to isolate and audit security controls, increasing the risk of systemic vulnerabilities and hindering compliance efforts. The lack of encapsulation and information hiding would expose sensitive data and logic, violating principles of data protection and increasing the likelihood of unauthorized access, which is a direct contravention of DPA 2018 and GDPR. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on implementing a large number of disparate security features without a cohesive architectural strategy would also be problematic. While individual features might seem secure, their integration into a complex, unmanaged system can create unforeseen vulnerabilities. This lack of abstraction and modularity makes it challenging to understand the overall security posture and to demonstrate compliance effectively as the interdependencies become opaque. This would likely fall short of the appropriate technical and organizational measures required by data protection regulations. A third incorrect approach that neglects information hiding by exposing internal system logic and data structures would create significant security risks. This transparency, while potentially aiding developers in some contexts, directly undermines security by providing attackers with detailed knowledge of the system's inner workings, making it easier to identify and exploit weaknesses. This directly contradicts the fundamental security principle of minimizing the information available to potential adversaries, which is a cornerstone of effective security architecture and a prerequisite for regulatory compliance. The professional reasoning process should involve a thorough impact assessment of each design choice against the defined security requirements and regulatory obligations. This includes evaluating how each security design principle contributes to or detracts from the system's ability to protect sensitive data, manage access, and remain auditable. The architect must consider the trade-offs between complexity, performance, and security, always prioritizing designs that offer clear separation of concerns, controlled interfaces, and robust protection of information. Question 5. System analysis indicates that a new public safety communication network is being rapidly deployed to enhance emergency response capabilities. The architect has identified several potential security vulnerabilities in the proposed architecture that, if exploited, could disrupt critical communication channels, jeopardizing public safety. The regulatory framework mandates a security by design approach and requires comprehensive risk mitigation before system activation. What is the most appropriate course of action for the certified security architect? Option A. Accept the vendor's assurances regarding the security of their components and proceed with deployment, assuming their built-in security features are sufficient. Option B. Recommend delaying the network activation until all identified vulnerabilities are addressed and a formal risk assessment is completed and approved, ensuring compliance with the regulatory framework. Option C. Proceed with the deployment as scheduled, relying on post-deployment patching and monitoring to address any emergent security issues, as speed is critical for public safety. Option D. Implement a minimal set of security controls that are quick to deploy, focusing on the most critical vulnerabilities and deferring less urgent security enhancements to a later phase. The correct answer is B. Recommend delaying the network activation until all identified vulnerabilities are addressed and a formal risk assessment is completed and approved, ensuring compliance with the regulatory framework. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid deployment of critical public safety infrastructure and the need for robust security architecture that complies with stringent regulatory requirements. The certified security architect must balance operational needs with legal and ethical obligations to protect public safety and sensitive data. Careful judgment is required to ensure that security measures are not only effective, but also legally sound and ethically defensible, especially when dealing with systems that directly impact public welfare. The correct approach involves a thorough risk assessment and the implementation of security controls that are demonstrably aligned with the specified regulatory framework. This means proactively identifying potential vulnerabilities, evaluating their impact on public safety, and designing security solutions that meet or exceed the mandated standards. The justification lies in the architect's professional responsibility to uphold the law and ethical principles, ensuring that the deployed system is secure, reliable, and compliant, thereby safeguarding public trust and preventing potential harm. Adherence to the regulatory framework is paramount, as failure to comply can lead to legal repercussions, reputational damage, and, most importantly, compromise public safety. An approach that prioritizes speed over comprehensive security review would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the regulatory mandate to ensure security by design and by default. It risks introducing vulnerabilities that could be exploited, leading to system failures, data breaches, or denial of service, all of which directly endanger public safety. Such an approach violates the ethical duty of care owed to the public and breaches the architect's professional obligations under the relevant regulatory framework. Another incorrect approach would be to implement security measures that are overly burdensome or technically infeasible without proper justification. While security is critical, it must be proportionate to the identified risks and achievable within practical constraints. Implementing excessive or unnecessary controls can hinder system functionality, increase operational costs, and potentially create new security weaknesses through complexity. This approach fails to demonstrate due diligence in risk management and may not align with the spirit or letter of the regulations, which often seek a balance between security and operational efficiency. Finally, an approach that relies solely on vendor-provided security features without independent verification and integration planning is also professionally unsound. While vendors offer security solutions, the architect's responsibility is to ensure these solutions are appropriate for the specific context, properly configured, and integrated into a holistic security architecture. Blindly trusting vendor claims without due diligence can lead to security gaps and noncompliance, as the architect must validate that the chosen solutions meet the specific requirements of the public safety system and the governing regulations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, thoroughly understand the specific regulatory requirements applicable to the public safety system. Second, conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify threats and vulnerabilities relevant to the system's function and the data it handles. Third, design security controls that directly address these risks and align with regulatory mandates. Fourth, document all design decisions, risk assessments, and compliance justifications. Finally, engage in continuous monitoring and review to adapt to evolving threats and regulatory changes. Question 6. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a critical legacy system, responsible for processing sensitive financial data and generating regulatory reports, is highly vulnerable to data exfiltration due to outdated security protocols. The business function is essential for ongoing operations and compliance. Which of the following risk management strategies is the most appropriate and professionally justifiable approach for a certified security architect to recommend? Option A. Implement a comprehensive suite of security controls to reduce the likelihood and impact of data exfiltration. Option B. Secure comprehensive cyber insurance to cover potential financial losses resulting from data exfiltration. Option C. Formally accept the risk, documenting that the potential impact is within the organization's acceptable risk tolerance. Option D. Advocate for the immediate decommissioning of the legacy system and the cessation of the associated business function. Correct answer is A. Implement a comprehensive suite of security controls to reduce the likelihood and impact of data exfiltration. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge for certified security architects, CSA, where a critical business function is exposed to significant cyber threats, and the organization must decide how to manage this risk. The challenge lies in balancing security requirements with business continuity, cost-effectiveness, and regulatory compliance. A CSA must not only identify risks, but also propose and justify appropriate strategies based on a thorough understanding of the threat landscape, the business's risk appetite, and applicable regulations. The decision-making process requires analytical rigor and a clear articulation of the rationale behind the chosen strategy. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment of the risk and the selection of a strategy that aligns with the organization's overall risk management framework and regulatory obligations. In this case, the identified risk of data exfiltration from the legacy system, which is critical for financial reporting and subject to stringent data protection regulations, e.g., GDPR if operating within the EU, or relevant U.S. financial regulations like SOX if applicable to the exam's jurisdiction, necessitates a proactive and robust response. Choosing to mitigate the risk is the most appropriate strategy. Mitigation involves implementing controls to reduce the likelihood or impact of the threat. This could include enhancing access controls, deploying intrusion detection systems, encrypting sensitive data at rest and in transit, and implementing regular security audits and vulnerability assessments. This approach directly addresses the identified risk by reducing its exposure and potential consequences, thereby upholding the organization's duty of care and compliance with data protection and financial reporting regulations. It demonstrates a commitment to security best practices and regulatory adherence. Choosing to avoid the risk would involve discontinuing the use of the legacy system entirely or ceasing the specific business function that exposes the data. While this eliminates the risk, it is often not feasible for critical business functions and can have significant negative impacts on business operations and revenue. In this scenario, avoiding the use of a critical financial reporting system is likely impractical. Choosing to transfer the risk, for example, through cyber insurance, does not eliminate the risk itself, but shifts the financial burden of a breach to a third party. However, insurance typically does not cover all potential losses, and the organization still bears the responsibility for implementing security measures and managing the incident. Relying solely on insurance without implementing controls would be a failure to meet regulatory obligations for data protection and could lead to significant reputational damage and regulatory penalties. Choosing to accept the risk implies that the organization acknowledges the potential for data exfiltration, but deems the likelihood or impact to be within its acceptable risk tolerance, or that the cost of other strategies outweighs the potential loss. Without a formal risk assessment and documented acceptance by senior management, this approach is highly problematic. For a critical financial reporting system with sensitive data, accepting such a significant risk without implementing controls would likely violate regulatory requirements for data security and could lead to severe consequences in the event of a breach. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for stakeholder trust and regulatory mandates. Professionals should approach such situations by first conducting a thorough risk assessment, identifying threats, vulnerabilities, and potential impacts. This assessment should inform the selection of the most appropriate risk management strategy, considering the organization's risk appetite, business objectives, and regulatory landscape. The chosen strategy must be documented, implemented with appropriate controls, and regularly reviewed and updated. Clear communication with stakeholders regarding the identified risks and the chosen management strategy is also crucial. Question 7. The audit findings indicate that the organization's recent adoption of software-defined networking, SDN, has introduced potential vulnerabilities in its network segmentation and traffic control mechanisms, which may not be adequately addressed by current security policies. As the Certified Security Architect, CSA, which of the following design considerations best aligns with regulatory expectations for securing an SDN environment? Option A. Assume that existing traditional network security appliances, such as firewalls and intrusion detection systems, deployed at the network perimeter are sufficient to protect the SDN infrastructure. Option B. Prioritize the implementation of granular security policies directly within the SDN controller and at the network fabric level, ensuring secure communication channels between all SDN components and enforcing the principle of least privilege for network functions. Option C. Focus solely on securing the physical infrastructure of the SDN deployment, believing that the inherent security of the hardware components will mitigate most software-related risks. Option D. Implement broad, network-wide security policies without specific consideration for the unique control and data plane interactions within the SDN architecture, relying on general security best practices. The correct answer is B. Prioritize the implementation of granular security policies directly within the SDN controller and at the network fabric level, ensuring secure communication channels between all SDN components and enforcing the principle of least privilege for network functions. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential gap in the organization's security posture related to its adoption of software-defined networking, SDN. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the Certified Security Architect, CSA, to balance the benefits of SDN, such as agility and centralized control, with its inherent security risks. The rapid evolution of SDN technologies and the potential for misconfigurations or vulnerabilities in the control plane, data plane, or management plane necessitate a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape to ensure compliance and robust security design. Careful judgment is required to prioritize security controls that align with the organization's risk appetite and the specific regulatory requirements applicable to its industry and operations. The correct approach involves a comprehensive security architecture review that prioritizes the implementation of robust security controls within the SDN environment, focusing on the principle of least privilege for network functions and traffic segmentation. This approach directly addresses the audit findings by proactively identifying and mitigating potential vulnerabilities. Specifically, it would involve designing and implementing security policies at the network edge and within the SDN fabric, ensuring secure communication channels between SDN components, controller, switches, applications, and establishing strong authentication and authorization mechanisms for access to the SDN controller. This aligns with general cybersecurity best practices and the spirit of regulatory frameworks that mandate risk assessment and the implementation of appropriate security measures to protect sensitive data and critical infrastructure. For a CSA, this means translating regulatory mandates into concrete architectural designs. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the audit findings as a minor issue or to assume that existing traditional network security controls are sufficient for the SDN environment. This is professionally unacceptable because SDN introduces new attack vectors and a centralized control plane that, if compromised, can have a widespread impact. Relying solely on perimeter security or assuming that the inherent security of SDN hardware is adequate ignores the critical need for security to be integrated into the SDN architecture itself. This failure to adapt security strategies to the unique characteristics of SDN could lead to regulatory noncompliance, as many regulations require a proactive and layered security approach that accounts for evolving technologies. Another incorrect approach would be to implement security controls without a clear understanding of their impact on SDN functionality, or without considering the specific regulatory requirements. For example, overly restrictive firewall rules applied without proper SDN integration could disrupt network operations and hinder legitimate traffic, leading to operational failures. Furthermore, implementing security measures that do not align with the organization's specific compliance obligations would be a significant ethical and professional failure. The CSA must ensure that security designs are not only technically sound, but also legally and ethically defensible within the relevant regulatory framework. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes identifying all relevant regulatory requirements, understanding the specific security implications of the technology in question, SDN in this case, evaluating potential threats and vulnerabilities, and then designing security controls that mitigate these risks while ensuring operational continuity and compliance. The CSA must engage with stakeholders, including legal and compliance teams, to ensure that the proposed security architecture meets all obligations. Continuous monitoring and adaptation of security controls are also crucial, given the dynamic nature of both SDN and the threat landscape. Question 8. The efficiency study reveals that the current network architecture is experiencing significant latency issues impacting critical business operations. The proposed solution involves a broad overhaul of network routing and the introduction of new high-throughput traffic inspection points to optimize data flow. As a certified security architect, what is the most appropriate approach to ensure both operational efficiency and robust security compliance? Option A. Focus solely on optimizing network routing for maximum speed, deferring any security considerations until the performance targets are met and the system is stable. Option B. Prioritize the implementation of network segmentation and granular traffic inspection policies, followed by a phased rollout of performance-enhancing routing changes with continuous security validation throughout the process. Option C. Implement the proposed network changes immediately to address the critical latency issues, with security reviews conducted post-implementation during a scheduled maintenance window. Option D. Introduce the new traffic inspection points without altering existing routing, assuming current security controls will adequately protect the network despite the increased traffic volume. The correct answer is C. Implement the proposed network changes immediately to address the critical latency issues, with security reviews conducted post-implementation during a scheduled maintenance window. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between optimizing network performance for user experience and maintaining robust security posture, especially when faced with potential regulatory scrutiny. The Certified Security Architect, CSA, must balance these competing demands, ensuring that any architectural changes do not inadvertently create vulnerabilities or violate compliance requirements. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that is both technically sound and legally defensible. The correct approach involves a phased implementation of network segmentation and traffic inspection, coupled with continuous monitoring and validation against established security policies and relevant regulatory frameworks. This method ensures that security is not an afterthought, but is integrated into the architectural design and operational processes. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of defense in depth and least privilege, which are foundational to secure network architecture. Regulatory justification stems from the need to protect sensitive data, prevent unauthorized access, and maintain operational resilience, all of which are mandated by various security-related regulations. By segmenting the network, the impact of a breach is contained, and by inspecting traffic, malicious activity can be detected and mitigated, thereby fulfilling obligations to protect data and systems. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of deployment over thorough security validation would be professionally unacceptable. This failure would stem from a disregard for the potential for introducing new attack vectors or bypassing existing security controls during the rapid implementation. Such an approach could lead to regulatory noncompliance if it results in inadequate protection of regulated data, such as personal identifiable information or financial records, exposing the organization to significant fines and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on performance metrics without considering the security implications of traffic routing and access control would also be a significant failure. This oversight could lead to the exposure of sensitive network segments or critical assets to unauthorized access, violating the principle of confidentiality and integrity. Ethically, this demonstrates a lack of due diligence in safeguarding the organization's digital assets and the data entrusted to it. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, evaluating the likelihood and impact of security incidents, and determining appropriate controls. Architects must consult relevant regulatory requirements and internal security policies throughout the design and implementation phases. A key decision-making step is to conduct thorough security testing and validation before and after any architectural changes, ensuring that security objectives are met and that no new risks are introduced. Collaboration with compliance and legal teams is also crucial to ensure adherence to all applicable laws and regulations. Question 9. Investigation of a new cloud-based financial services platform security architecture documentation reveals a significant gap in its current state. The project is under tight deadlines, and the development team has produced extensive, highly detailed technical specifications for individual microservices, but has not yet created overarching architectural diagrams or a consolidated document outlining the security controls and their mapping to relevant regulatory requirements. The chief security architect must decide on the immediate next steps for documentation, which approach best aligns with the certified security architect (CSA) responsibilities and regulatory expectations for demonstrating a secure architecture. Option A. Continue with the detailed microservice specifications, assuming that the overall architecture can be inferred and documented later once the system is fully built. Option B. Delegate the creation of high-level diagrams to junior architects, while senior architects focus on the remaining detailed microservice specifications. Option C. Focus on documenting only the security controls that have been explicitly requested by the compliance team for the current audit cycle. Option D. Immediately halt development to create comprehensive, high-level architectural diagrams, context, logical, physical views, and a security control matrix mapping to applicable regulations. Then proceed with detailed microservice documentation. The correct answer is D. Immediately halt development to create comprehensive, high-level architectural diagrams, context, logical, physical views, and a security control matrix mapping to applicable regulations. Then proceed with detailed microservice documentation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for comprehensive security architecture documentation with the practical constraints of project timelines and resource availability. Architects must ensure that documentation meets regulatory compliance standards while remaining accessible and useful to various stakeholders, including development teams, auditors, and management. The risk of incomplete or inaccurate documentation can lead to significant security vulnerabilities, compliance failures, and project delays. Careful judgment is required to prioritize documentation elements that are critical for security assurance and regulatory adherence. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves developing a layered documentation strategy that prioritizes the creation of high-level architectural diagrams, e.g., context, logical and physical views, and detailed security control descriptions, aligned with the chosen regulatory framework, e.g., NIST SB 800-53 for U.S. federal systems, or ISO 27001 for broader information security management. This strategy ensures that the most critical aspects of the security architecture are documented first, providing a clear overview and foundation for more detailed specifications. The use of standardized notation e.g., UML for system design, C4 model for software architecture, and adherence to established documentation standards e.g., internal organizational standards, or industry best practices like those outlined by OWASP for web application security, ensures consistency, clarity, and auditability. This approach directly addresses the need for demonstrable compliance with regulatory requirements by providing traceable evidence of security controls and their architectural integration. Incorrect approaches analysis. Focusing solely on detailed technical specifications without high-level diagrams creates a documentation set that is difficult to understand for non-technical stakeholders and may obscure the overall security posture. This failure to provide a clear architectural overview can lead to misinterpretations and a lack of buy-in from management, potentially hindering security initiatives. It also makes it harder for auditors to assess the system's compliance at a strategic level. Prioritizing the creation of extensive, granular documentation for every minor component before establishing the core architectural views can lead to significant time and resource overruns. This can result in incomplete documentation for critical components due to project deadlines, thereby failing to meet regulatory requirements for comprehensive security architecture documentation. It also risks creating documentation that is overly complex and difficult to maintain. Adopting a just-in-time documentation approach, where documentation is created only when explicitly requested by auditors or during incident response, is a severe regulatory and ethical failure. This reactive approach means that the security architecture is not proactively designed, reviewed, or validated against regulatory requirements. It leaves the organization vulnerable to unknown risks and unable to demonstrate due diligence, leading to potential fines and reputational damage. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a risk-based, phased approach to security architecture documentation. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulatory and compliance obligations applicable to the system or organization. 2. Identifying key stakeholders and their information needs regarding the security architecture. 3. Developing a documentation plan that prioritizes the creation of essential architectural views and control descriptions aligned with regulatory mandates. 4. Utilizing standardized modeling techniques and notation for clarity and consistency. 5. Iteratively refining and expanding documentation based on project progress and evolving requirements, ensuring that critical security elements are always documented. 6. Establishing a process for regular review and maintenance of documentation to ensure its accuracy and relevance. Question 10. Quality control measures reveal that a financial institution's wireless network infrastructure is currently configured with WPA2PSK and relies solely on network perimeter firewalls for intrusion detection. The security architecture team is proposing an upgrade. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of robust wireless security and proactive threat detection within a regulated environment? Option A. Maintain WPA2PSK but implement additional network segmentation and enhance firewall rules to detect wireless threats. Option B. Upgrade to WPA3 Enterprise. Implement a wireless intrusion detection system, WIDS, with comprehensive monitoring capabilities, and ensure the network utilizes the latest supported 802.11 standards. Option C. Migrate to WPA2 Enterprise with radius authentication and deploy a wireless intrusion detection system, WIDS, focused only on rogue access point detection. Option D. Upgrade to WPA3 PSK only and deploy a wireless intrusion prevention system, WIPS, that operates in blocking mode. Correct answer is B. Upgrade to WPA3 Enterprise. Implement a wireless intrusion detection system, WIDS, with comprehensive monitoring capabilities, and ensure the network utilizes the latest supported 802.11 standards. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical need to balance robust wireless security with operational efficiency and compliance with the specified regulatory framework. The Certified Security Architect, CSA, must demonstrate a deep understanding of the nuances between WPA2/WPA3, 802.11 standards, and the role of wireless intrusion detection systems, WIDS, in a real-world deployment. The challenge lies in selecting the most appropriate and compliant security posture without introducing unnecessary vulnerabilities or operational burdens. Careful judgment is required to align technical choices with the overarching security objectives and regulatory mandates. The correct approach involves a layered security strategy that prioritizes the most secure and current standards while leveraging WIDS for proactive threat detection. This approach is best professional practice because it directly addresses the evolving threat landscape for wireless networks. WPA3 offers significant security enhancements over WPA2, including stronger encryption and protection against brute force attacks, aligning with the principle of using the strongest available security mechanisms. Integrating WIDS provides an essential monitoring capability, allowing for the detection of rogue access points, denial of service attacks, and other wireless threats that might bypass perimeter defenses. This proactive detection and response capability is crucial for maintaining a secure environment and is implicitly supported by regulatory frameworks that emphasize risk management and incident detection. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on WPA2 without considering WPA3 represents a failure to adopt current best practices and potentially a regulatory oversight if the framework mandates or strongly recommends the use of the latest security standards. WPA2, while still widely used, has known vulnerabilities that WPA3 addresses. Relying on it exclusively could be deemed insufficient for a security architect responsible for a robust defense. Another incorrect approach that neglects the implementation of WIDS, even with WPA3, creates a significant blind spot. While strong encryption is vital, it does not inherently provide visibility into malicious activities occurring on the wireless network itself. The absence of WIDS means that attacks like deauthentication floods, rogue APs impersonating legitimate ones, or unauthorized devices attempting to connect might go undetected until they cause significant damage or compromise data. This lack of proactive monitoring is a failure in risk management and incident preparedness, which are core tenets of most security regulations. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes older 802.11 standards over newer, more secure ones, even if they support WPA2/WPA3, is also professionally unacceptable. Newer 802.11 standards often include security enhancements at the protocol level, beyond just the encryption used. For example, newer standards may offer better protection against certain types of interference or jamming. Choosing older standards without a compelling technical or operational justification would be a failure to leverage the full security capabilities available. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment, a review of the applicable regulatory framework for any explicit mandates or recommendations regarding wireless security, and an evaluation of the available technologies against those requirements. Architects should always strive to implement the most secure and up-to-date solutions that are feasible within the operational context, ensuring that monitoring and detection capabilities are integrated to provide comprehensive security coverage. Question 11. Strategic planning requires a certified security architect to select the most effective threat modeling methodology for a new online banking platform. The platform handles sensitive customer financial data and is subject to strict regulatory oversight. Considering the need for comprehensive risk identification and mitigation, which threat modeling approach would best align with the principles of proactive security architecture and regulatory compliance for such a system? Option A. Employing a threat modeling technique that is solely based on the organization's past security incidents, neglecting potential future attack vectors or emerging threats. Option B. Adopting a methodology that prioritizes the enumeration of all possible technical vulnerabilities without considering the business impact or the likelihood of exploitation in the context of financial transactions. Option C. Applying Stride to identify threats based on categories like spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege, and then using this to inform the design of security controls for data flows and trust boundaries within the banking platform. Option D. Utilizing a methodology that primarily focuses on identifying known vulnerabilities in common software components, without a structured approach to architectural analysis or threat actor motivations. The correct answer is C. Applying Stride to identify threats based on categories like spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege, and then using this to inform the design of security controls for data flows and trust boundaries within the banking platform. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a certified security architect, CSA, must select the most appropriate threat modeling methodology for a critical financial system, ensuring compliance with stringent regulatory frameworks. The choice of methodology directly impacts the effectiveness of security controls, the ability to identify and mitigate risks, and ultimately, the system's resilience against sophisticated threats. Failure to select an appropriate methodology can lead to significant financial losses, reputational damage, and regulatory penalties. The architect must balance the need for thoroughness with project timelines and resource constraints, all while adhering to the specific regulatory landscape governing financial institutions. The correct approach involves selecting a methodology that provides a structured and comprehensive framework for identifying potential threats, vulnerabilities, and countermeasures, aligning with the principles of risk management and due diligence mandated by regulatory bodies. For a financial system, a methodology that emphasizes data flow, trust boundaries, and the potential for financial fraud or data exfiltration would be paramount. An incorrect approach would be to adopt a methodology that is overly simplistic or lacks the depth required for a complex financial system. For instance, a methodology that focuses solely on technical vulnerabilities without considering the business context or the motivations of attackers might miss critical attack vectors. Another incorrect approach would be to use a methodology that is not well suited to the specific architecture or technology stack of the system, leading to incomplete or inaccurate threat assessments. Furthermore, using a methodology without considering its alignment with regulatory expectations for risk assessment and mitigation would be a significant professional and ethical failure. Regulatory frameworks for financial services typically require a proactive and systematic approach to security risk management, which necessitates a robust threat modeling process. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a thorough understanding of the system's architecture, the business objectives, the threat landscape, and the applicable regulatory requirements. The architect should evaluate each threat modeling methodology against these criteria, considering its strengths, weaknesses, and suitability for the specific context. A systematic evaluation process, potentially involving a comparative analysis of methodologies against a defined set of requirements, is crucial for making an informed and defensible decision. Question 12. When evaluating the optimization of security architecture processes within a regulated financial institution, which approach best balances security effectiveness, operational efficiency, and compliance with UK financial services regulations? Option A. Implementing a comprehensive, top-down redesign of all security processes simultaneously, irrespective of immediate operational impact, to achieve a state-of-the-art security posture. Option B. Outsourcing all security architecture process design and implementation to a third-party vendor with minimal internal oversight to leverage external expertise. Option C. Conducting a phased, iterative refinement of security processes, prioritizing areas of highest risk and aligning changes with business objectives and regulatory requirements while ensuring stakeholder engagement. Option D. Adopting the newest security technologies and frameworks recommended by industry analysts, without a detailed assessment of their integration into existing workflows or their specific relevance to the institution's risk profile. The correct answer is A. Implementing a comprehensive, top-down redesign of all security processes simultaneously, irrespective of immediate operational impact, to achieve a state-of-the-art security posture. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because a security architect must balance the imperative of robust security with the practicalities of operational efficiency and cost-effectiveness. The Certified Security Architect (CSA) designation implies a need to adhere to established security principles and frameworks, often within a specific regulatory context. The architect's judgment is critical in selecting an approach that is not only technically sound, but also compliant and sustainable. The correct approach involves a phased, iterative refinement of security processes, aligning them with business objectives and regulatory mandates. This method ensures that security controls are integrated thoughtfully, minimizing disruption and maximizing effectiveness. This aligns with the principles of security by design and defense in depth, which are fundamental to secure architecture. Furthermore, regulatory frameworks often emphasize a risk-based approach, where resources are prioritized based on the likelihood and impact of threats, which this iterative refinement facilitates. An approach that prioritizes immediate, comprehensive security overhaul without considering operational impact or phased implementation is likely to be disruptive and unsustainable. This could lead to resistance from operational teams and potentially introduce new vulnerabilities through rush changes. It fails to acknowledge the principle of proportionality in security, where controls should be commensurate with the risks. An approach that focuses solely on adopting the latest security technologies without a clear understanding of their integration into existing processes or their alignment with specific business risks is also flawed. This can lead to expensive, underutilized solutions that do not address the most critical threats and may even create complexity that hinders security operations. It neglects the principle of context-aware security, where solutions must be tailored to the specific environment and threat landscape. An approach that delegates all security architecture decisions to external consultants without internal validation or understanding risks, the organization becoming dependent on external expertise and potentially implementing solutions that are not fully understood or maintained internally. This can also lead to a disconnect between the implemented security and the organization's actual operational realities and risk appetite, potentially failing to meet regulatory expectations for internal accountability. Professionals should approach security architecture design by first understanding the business context and risk appetite. This should be followed by a thorough assessment of existing processes and controls. Security principles and frameworks should then be applied to identify gaps and opportunities for improvement. A phased, iterative approach, prioritizing high-risk areas and ensuring stakeholder buy-in, is generally the most effective and compliant strategy. Question 13. Market research demonstrates that a new generation of endpoint protection platforms, EP, offers advanced behavioral analysis and machine learning capabilities for detecting novel malware threats, alongside robust host-based firewall functionalities. As a certified security architect, CSA, operating within a jurisdiction with strict data protection and incident reporting regulations, which approach to integrating these EPPs into the organization's security posture best aligns with regulatory compliance and risk mitigation. Option A. Conduct a detailed risk assessment that maps the EPP's capabilities, including its antivirus, anti-malware, and host-based firewall features, against the specific data protection, logging, and incident reporting obligations mandated by the relevant jurisdiction's regulatory framework. Option B. Prioritize EPP solutions that offer the highest detection rates and lowest performance impact, assuming that advanced threat detection inherently satisfies regulatory requirements for data protection. Option C. Focus on implementing the EPP's advanced threat intelligence feeds and machine learning models, as these are universally recognized as the most critical components for modern cybersecurity, with regulatory considerations being a secondary concern. Option D. Deploy the EPP with default configurations, relying on the vendor's security best practices, and only investigate specific regulatory compliance aspects if a security incident occurs. Correct answer is B. Prioritize EPP solutions that offer the highest detection rates and lowest performance impact, assuming that advanced threat detection inherently satisfies regulatory requirements for data protection. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the adoption of advanced security technologies with the need to comply with specific regulatory mandates for data protection and system integrity. The Certified Security Architect, CSA, must not only understand the technical capabilities of endpoint protection platforms, EP, but also how their implementation and configuration align with the stringent requirements of the relevant regulatory framework. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying these regulations to a dynamic technological landscape, ensuring that security measures are both effective and compliant, thereby avoiding significant legal, financial, and reputational damage. The correct approach involves a thorough risk assessment that explicitly considers the regulatory compliance implications of EPP deployment. This means identifying potential threats to sensitive data and systems, evaluating the effectiveness of EPP features, antivirus, anti-malware, host-based firewalls, in mitigating these threats, and crucially, mapping these controls to specific regulatory obligations. For instance, if the jurisdiction mandates specific data encryption standards or logging requirements, the risk assessment must determine if the chosen EPP solution can meet these, and if its configuration supports compliance. This proactive, risk-based methodology ensures that security investments are strategically aligned with both threat landscapes and legal obligations, demonstrating due diligence and a commitment to regulatory adherence. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical efficacy without considering regulatory alignment would be professionally unacceptable. For example, selecting an EPP based purely on its detection rates or performance impact without verifying if its logging capabilities meet the jurisdiction's audit trail requirements would be a significant regulatory failure. This oversight could lead to noncompliance with data breach notification laws or audit requirements, resulting in penalties. Similarly, implementing EPP features like host-based firewalls without ensuring they are configured to block only unauthorized network traffic, as per specific data access regulations, could inadvertently violate data privacy principles. Another failure would be to assume that a generic EPP solution automatically satisfies all regulatory needs without a specific assessment, ignoring the nuanced requirements of the jurisdiction's data protection laws. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance as a foundational element of security architecture. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to the organization's data and operations. 2. Conducting a comprehensive threat and vulnerability assessment. 3. Evaluating security solutions, such as EPPs, against both technical requirements and regulatory mandates. 4. Documenting the risk assessment process, including how EPP features address identified risks and comply with regulations. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating the assessment as threats and regulations evolve. This systematic approach ensures that security decisions are informed, defensible, and compliant. Question 14. Analysis of the process for a Certified Security Architect, CSA, to identify critical business assets and their recovery time objectives, RTO, within a U.S. regulatory context, which approach best aligns with the principles of a business impact analysis, BIA, and regulatory compliance. Option A. Prioritizing IT assets based on their technical complexity and the cost of their implementation, then assigning RTOs based on the fastest technically feasible recovery time for each asset. Option B. Focusing solely on the volume of data processed by an IT asset to determine its criticality and setting RTOs based on the availability of existing backup solutions without business consultation. Option C. Engaging with business stakeholders to identify critical business functions, assessing the impact of their disruption, and deriving RTOs from these business impact assessments to align with regulatory requirements. Option D. Assigning RTOs based on industry best practices for similar IT systems, without specific consideration for the organization's unique business functions or regulatory obligations. The correct answer is A. Prioritizing IT assets based on their technical complexity and the cost of their implementation, then assigning RTOs based on the fastest technically feasible recovery time for each asset. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because a certified security architect, CSA, must balance the technical requirements of security with the business's operational needs and regulatory obligations. Identifying critical assets and their recovery time objectives, RTO, is foundational to a business impact analysis, BIA, directly influencing disaster recovery and business continuity planning. The difficulty lies in accurately assessing business criticality, which can be subjective, and aligning it with achievable technical recovery strategies within budgetary and resource constraints, all while adhering to specific regulatory mandates. Careful judgment is required to avoid over- or undersourcing critical functions. The correct approach involves a systematic process of engaging with business stakeholders to understand the impact of disruption on each business function and its supporting IT assets. This engagement allows for the identification of truly critical assets, defined by their direct contribution to essential business operations, and the potential financial, reputational, and legal consequences of their unavailability. RTOs are then derived from these business impact assessments, representing the maximum tolerable downtime for each critical asset. This approach is correct because it aligns security architecture directly with business needs and regulatory compliance. For a CSA operating under U.S. regulations, this aligns with frameworks like NIST SB 800-34, Contingency Planning Guide for Federal Information Systems, which emphasizes the importance of a BIA to identify critical systems and establish recovery priorities and objectives. Ethical considerations also demand that the architect prioritizes the continuity of services that are essential to public safety, financial stability, or regulatory adherence, as mandated by various U.S. laws and industry standards. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on IT-centric metrics or perceived technical importance when identifying critical assets. For instance, prioritizing assets based on their complexity or the cost of their implementation, rather than their direct impact on business operations, would be a failure. This overlooks the core purpose of a BIA, which is to quantify the business impact of an outage. Such an approach could lead to insufficient resources being allocated to truly critical business functions, potentially violating regulatory requirements that mandate the protection of essential services or data. Another incorrect approach would be to assign RTOs based on readily available technical solutions, without a thorough understanding of the business's tolerance for downtime. For example, setting an RTO of as fast as technically possible, without consulting business units about their actual needs and the financial implications of downtime, would be a significant oversight. This can lead to inefficient resource allocation, as expensive, rapid recovery solutions might be implemented for non-critical functions, while critical functions might have longer, unacceptable RTOs. This failure to align RTOs with business requirements can result in noncompliance with regulations that specify maximum downtime for certain types of data or services. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured, collaborative approach. First, understand the specific regulatory landscape applicable to the organization, e.g., HIPAA for healthcare, GLBA for financial services, FISMA for federal agencies. Second, initiate a comprehensive BIA process that actively involves business unit leaders to identify critical functions and their dependencies. Third, quantify the impact of disruption for each function, considering financial, operational, legal, and reputational factors. Fourth, derive RTOs and recovery point objectives, RPO, directly from these business impact assessments. Finally, translate these business requirements into technical recovery strategies and architectural designs, ensuring that the chosen solutions are cost-effective, achievable, and compliant with all relevant regulations. Question 15. Compliance review shows that a rapidly growing technology firm, operating under UK financial services regulations, has been using a risk assessment methodology that relies heavily on subjective expert opinions to categorize potential security threats. While this has helped identify a broad range of risks, senior management is concerned about the lack of concrete data to justify mitigation investments and the potential for overlooking critical, albeit less obvious, threats. The Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, is proposing a shift in their risk assessment strategy. Which of the following approaches would best address the current shortcomings and align with regulatory expectations for demonstrating a robust understanding of risk? Option A. Continue with the current qualitative approach, but mandate more frequent reviews and subjective reevaluations by a larger panel of internal experts. Option B. Adopt a purely quantitative risk assessment methodology, requiring extensive data collection and complex modeling for every identified risk to assign precise numerical values to likelihood and impact. Option C. Implement a hybrid risk assessment methodology that combines qualitative techniques for initial risk identification and prioritization with quantitative analysis for high-impact risks to determine potential financial losses. Option D. Transition to a purely qualitative risk assessment methodology, focusing on detailed narrative descriptions of potential threats and their impacts, relying solely on expert judgment for all risk evaluations. The correct answer is C. Implement a hybrid risk assessment methodology that combines qualitative techniques for initial risk identification and prioritization with quantitative analysis for high-impact risks to determine potential financial losses. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge for security architects, balancing the need for robust risk assessment with the practical constraints of time and resources. The organization's rapid growth and the increasing complexity of its digital footprint mean that a superficial or overly simplistic approach to risk assessment could lead to significant oversights, leaving critical vulnerabilities unaddressed. The professional challenge lies in selecting a methodology that provides sufficient depth and accuracy without becoming an insurmountable burden. Careful judgment is required to ensure the chosen methodology aligns with regulatory expectations and the organization's risk appetite. The correct approach involves a hybrid methodology that leverages the strengths of both qualitative and quantitative techniques. This approach begins with qualitative assessments to broadly identify and categorize risks based on their potential impact and likelihood, using expert judgment and descriptive scales. This allows for a rapid initial screening and prioritization. Subsequently, for high-priority risks identified qualitatively, quantitative analysis is applied. This involves assigning numerical values to the likelihood and impact of specific threats, enabling a more precise calculation of potential financial losses or other measurable consequences. This hybrid approach is professionally sound because it offers a pragmatic yet thorough risk assessment. It aligns with regulatory frameworks that often require a demonstrable understanding of risk, including both the nature of the threat and its potential business impact. By combining broad identification with detailed analysis where needed, it ensures that resources are focused effectively on the most significant risks, demonstrating due diligence and a commitment to informed decision-making. An approach that relies solely on qualitative assessment, while useful for initial identification, is professionally insufficient in this context. It fails to provide the objective, measurable data often required by regulators to demonstrate the severity of risks and the justification for mitigation strategies. This can lead to subjective interpretations and an inability to prioritize effectively based on concrete business impact. Conversely, an approach that attempts to apply quantitative analysis to every single identified risk from the outset is professionally impractical and inefficient. The extensive data collection and complex modeling required would be prohibitively time-consuming and resource-intensive, especially for an organization experiencing rapid growth. This would likely result in a delayed or incomplete risk assessment, failing to provide timely insights and potentially leaving the organization exposed. The professional decision-making process for such situations should involve 1. Understanding the regulatory landscape and specific compliance obligations relevant to the organization's industry and jurisdiction. 2. Assessing the organization's risk appetite and tolerance levels. 3. Evaluating the available resources, time, budget, expertise for conducting the risk assessment. 4. Considering the maturity of the organization's data collection and analysis capabilities. 5. Selecting a risk assessment methodology that best balances comprehensiveness, accuracy, and practicality, often favoring a hybrid approach that adapts to the nature and criticality of identified risks. Question 16. Compliance review shows that a critical business unit requires immediate, broad access to a sensitive customer database to meet an urgent reporting deadline. The security architect is tasked with providing a solution. Which approach best aligns with security architecture fundamentals and regulatory expectations? Option A. Grant the business unit broad access to the database immediately to meet the deadline, with a plan to conduct a security review and implement controls retrospectively within the next 2 weeks. Option B. Provide a temporary broad access solution that will be revoked once the reporting deadline has passed, without a formal risk assessment beforehand. Option C. Authorize the broad access request based solely on the urgency of the business requirement, deferring any security considerations until after the report is generated. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities associated with broad access. Then design and implement targeted security controls that uphold the CIA triad, least privilege, and zero trust principles before granting access. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities associated with broad access. Then design and implement targeted security controls that uphold the CIA triad, least privilege, and zero trust principles before granting access. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for system access with the fundamental security principles mandated by regulatory frameworks. The architect must ensure that any proposed solution not only addresses the immediate operational requirement, but also upholds the integrity of the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, availability, implements defense in depth, adheres to the principle of least privilege, and aligns with zero trust principles. Failure to do so could lead to significant security breaches, regulatory noncompliance, and reputational damage. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that prioritizes the security posture of the organization. This approach is professionally sound because it directly addresses the potential impact of granting broad access. By first identifying and evaluating the risks associated with the proposed broad access, the architect can then develop mitigation strategies that align with the CIA triad. For instance, granting broad access without proper controls directly compromises confidentiality and integrity. A risk assessment allows for the identification of specific threats and vulnerabilities, enabling the implementation of targeted controls that uphold the principle of least privilege by ensuring users only have access to what they absolutely need. This also supports a defense-in-depth strategy by layering security controls. Furthermore, it is a foundational element of zero trust, which assumes no implicit trust and requires continuous verification of access based on risk. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing data protection and financial services, depending on the specific jurisdiction for the CSA exam, e.g., GDPR in the EU or NIST-CSF in the US, mandate such risk-based approaches to security. Ethical considerations also demand that the architect act in the best interest of the organization and its stakeholders by protecting sensitive information and systems. Granting broad access without a prior risk assessment is professionally unacceptable. This approach fails to uphold the CIA triad by potentially exposing sensitive data, confidentiality, and allowing unauthorized modifications, integrity. It directly violates the principle of least privilege, as broad access inherently grants more permissions than necessary. This also undermines defense in depth by creating a wider attack surface. From a zero-trust perspective, it represents a failure to enforce continuous verification and explicit authorization. Regulatory frameworks would likely deem this negligent, leading to penalties for noncompliance with data protection and security standards. Implementing a temporary, broad access solution with the promise of reviewing it later is also professionally unsound. While it addresses the immediate operational need, it creates a significant window of vulnerability. This approach neglects the immediate risks to confidentiality, integrity, and availability. It bypasses the principle of least privilege and weakens defense in depth. Ethically, it prioritizes short-term convenience over long-term security and regulatory compliance, focusing solely on the operational efficiency of the requested access without considering the security implications is a critical failure. This approach ignores the fundamental tenets of security architecture, including the CIA triad and least privilege. It creates an unacceptable risk to the organization's assets and data, directly contravening regulatory requirements for due diligence and risk management. Such a myopic focus is ethically questionable, as it prioritizes expediency over the responsible stewardship of security. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the business requirement, then immediately proceeds to a thorough risk assessment. This assessment should identify potential threats, vulnerabilities, and the impact on confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Based on the risk assessment, Appropriate security controls should be designed and implemented, adhering to principles like least privilege and defense in depth, and aligning with zero trust architecture. This iterative process ensures that security is integrated into operational processes rather than being an afterthought, and satisfies regulatory and ethical obligations. Question 17. Research into the implementation of a new cloud-based data processing system for a financial institution operating under U.S. federal regulations, specifically the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act (GLBA) and the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard (PCI DSS), reveals a critical need to establish a robust security governance, risk management, and compliance (GRC) framework. The Certified Security Architect (CSA) is tasked with ensuring the architecture aligns with these mandates. Which of the following approaches best addresses this challenge? Option A. Develop a comprehensive set of interconnected security policies, standards, and procedures that directly map to the requirements of GLBA and PCI DSS, ensuring clear accountability and auditable implementation steps. Option B. Define high-level security standards for data encryption and access control, leaving the specific implementation details and documentation to individual development teams. Option C. Implement a suite of advanced security technologies and configurations that provide strong data protection, assuming that technical controls inherently satisfy regulatory obligations. Option D. Create detailed operational procedures for managing the new cloud environment, focusing on day-to-day tasks without explicitly linking them to overarching security policies or regulatory mandates. The correct answer is A. Develop a comprehensive set of interconnected security policies, standards, and procedures that directly map to the requirements of GLBA and PCI DSS, ensuring clear accountability and auditable implementation steps. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in security architecture, translating high-level governance requirements into actionable, auditable security policies, standards, and procedures within a specific regulatory context. The challenge lies in ensuring that the implemented controls are not only technically sound, but also demonstrably compliant with the relevant framework, which requires a deep understanding of both the technical architecture and the legal/regulatory landscape. The architect must balance the need for robust security with operational feasibility and the specific mandates of the governing regulations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves developing a comprehensive set of interconnected GRC artifacts. This begins with establishing clear, documented security policies that articulate the organization's overall security objectives and commitment, directly derived from the regulatory framework. These policies are then translated into specific, measurable security standards that define the required security controls and configurations. Finally, detailed procedures are created to guide the practical implementation and ongoing management of these standards, ensuring consistent application and providing auditable evidence of compliance. This layered approach ensures that the architecture is built upon a foundation of regulatory intent, with clear pathways for implementation and verification. Directly addressing the requirements of the Certified Security Architect, CSA, exams focus on GRC. Incorrect approach is analysis. Focusing solely on technical controls without explicit policy or procedural documentation fails to establish a clear governance framework. This approach risks creating a security architecture that is difficult to audit, lacks clear accountability, and may not directly map to regulatory requirements, leading to potential compliance gaps. Implementing only high-level security standards without detailed procedures for their application leaves the actual implementation to interpretation. This can result in inconsistent application of controls across the architecture, making it challenging to demonstrate uniform compliance and increasing the risk of security vulnerabilities due to ad hoc implementation. Developing detailed procedures without a clear link to overarching policies and standards creates a set of operational tasks that may not align with the organization's strategic security objectives or regulatory obligations. This can lead to inefficient resource allocation and a security posture that is not strategically aligned with compliance mandates. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach GRC implementation by first understanding the specific regulatory framework applicable to their organization. This understanding informs the development of high-level security policies that reflect the spirit and letter of the law. These policies then serve as the foundation for defining measurable security standards, which in turn dictate the creation of detailed, actionable procedures. This hierarchical and interconnected approach ensures that security architecture decisions are driven by governance, risk management, and compliance requirements, leading to a robust, auditable, and compliant security posture. Question 18. The audit findings indicate a significant gap in the organization's ability to detect and respond to advanced persistent threats, APT, on endpoints, with specific recommendations for enhancing visibility and containment capabilities. Considering the regulatory framework for financial services in the United States, which of the following approaches best addresses these audit findings in the context of endpoint detection and response EDR, deployment and integration? Option A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify the most critical APT attack vectors and prioritize EDR capabilities that provide deep visibility into endpoint behavior, threat hunting, and automated response actions, ensuring seamless integration with the existing security information and event management (SIEM) system to meet regulatory requirements for incident detection and response. Option B. Implement an EDR solution that primarily focuses on endpoint hardening and vulnerability management, as these are foundational security controls, and postpone the deployment of advanced detection and response capabilities until budget allows. Option C. Deploy an EDR solution that offers extensive endpoint telemetry and advanced threat intelligence feeds, even if these features are not directly related to the specific APT threats identified in the audit, and defer integration with existing security tools to a later phase. Option D. Select the EDR solution with the lowest upfront cost and minimal implementation complexity, focusing on basic antivirus functionalities to address the audit's general concern about endpoint security. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify the most critical APT attack vectors and prioritize EDR capabilities that provide deep visibility into endpoint behavior, threat hunting, and automated response actions, ensuring seamless integration with the existing security information and event management SIEM system to meet regulatory requirements for incident detection and response. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need to address audit findings with the long-term strategic implications of EDR deployment and integration within a specific regulatory context. The Certified Security Architect, CSA, must not only understand the technical capabilities of EDR, but also how its implementation aligns with and supports compliance obligations. The pressure to remediate findings quickly can lead to short-sighted decisions that may not be sustainable or fully compliant. Correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that prioritizes EDR capabilities based on their ability to detect and respond to threats identified in the audit, while also considering their integration with existing security infrastructure and their alignment with the specified regulatory framework. This approach ensures that the chosen EDR solution directly addresses the audit's concerns, enhances the organization's overall security posture, and meets regulatory requirements for threat detection, incident response, and data protection. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of proactive threat hunting, rapid incident containment, and continuous monitoring mandated by many security regulations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the cheapest EDR solution fails to consider the effectiveness of its detection capabilities against the specific threats highlighted by the audit, potentially leaving critical vulnerabilities unaddressed and violating regulatory requirements for adequate security controls. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes EDR features unrelated to the audit findings, such as advanced threat intelligence feeds that are not currently a compliance concern, wastes resources and delays remediation of the identified issues, which could lead to further noncompliance. Finally, an approach that neglects integration with existing security tools, such as SIEM or SOAR platforms, creates operational inefficiencies and hinders the ability to achieve a unified view of security events, potentially violating regulatory mandates for integrated security management and incident response. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the audit findings and the specific regulatory requirements. This involves mapping the identified risks to the capabilities of potential EDR solutions. The next step is to evaluate EDR solutions, not only on their technical merits, but also on their ability to integrate seamlessly with the existing security ecosystem and their demonstrable compliance with relevant regulations. Prioritization should be driven by the criticality of the audit findings and the regulatory impact of not addressing them. This systematic evaluation ensures that the chosen EDR solution is both effective and compliant. Question 19. Comparative studies suggest that when implementing a security architecture framework to meet stringent U.S. regulatory compliance requirements, a certified security architect faces a critical decision regarding which framework best balances enterprise-wide architectural coherence with specific cybersecurity mandates. Considering the need for demonstrable compliance with regulations such as HIPAA, PCI DSS, NIST SB 800-53, which of the following approaches would be most professionally sound and ethically justifiable for a U.S.-based financial services organization? Option A. Adopt the Zachman framework as the sole basis for security architecture, focusing on its 6-cell matrix to categorize and document all architectural artifacts, assuming that comprehensive documentation will inherently satisfy regulatory needs. Option B. Primarily leverage the NIST cybersecurity framework, integrating its domains and functions to define security requirements and controls, ensuring clear traceability to specific regulatory clauses, and providing a risk-based approach to security architecture. Option C. Utilize the SAPSA methodology exclusively to define security requirements and architecture, prioritizing its business-driven approach to security without explicitly mapping its outputs to specific U.S. regulatory controls or frameworks. Option D. Implement TOGAF as the primary enterprise architecture framework, focusing on its ADM phases for overall IT architecture, and treating security as a secondary consideration to be addressed only as specific compliance issues arise. The correct answer is B. Primarily leverage the NIST cybersecurity framework, integrating its domains and functions to define security requirements and controls, ensuring clear traceability to specific regulatory clauses, and providing a risk-based approach to security architecture. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge for certified security architects, CSA, when selecting and implementing a security architecture framework. The core difficulty lies in aligning the chosen framework's strengths with the specific regulatory compliance obligations and the organization's unique operational context. A CSA must not only understand the theoretical underpinnings of each framework, but also critically evaluate their practical applicability and their ability to demonstrably meet legal and ethical requirements. The professional challenge is amplified by the need to justify the chosen approach to stakeholders who may have varying levels of technical understanding and differing priorities. The correct approach involves selecting a framework that offers a robust methodology for defining security requirements, designing security controls, and ensuring their ongoing effectiveness, while also providing clear traceability to regulatory mandates. The NIST Cybersecurity Framework, CSF, is particularly well suited for this in a U.S. regulatory context. It provides a flexible, risk-based approach that can be tailored to an organization's specific needs and is widely recognized and accepted by U.S. regulatory bodies. Its focus on identifying, protecting, detecting, responding, and recovering from cyber threats directly maps to many compliance requirements, such as those found in HIPAA, PCI DSS, and various state-level data privacy laws. The CSF's emphasis on continuous improvement and its structured approach to cybersecurity risk management allows for the development of a security architecture that is both comprehensive and auditable, thereby fulfilling ethical obligations to protect sensitive information and comply with legal statutes. An approach that solely relies on the Zachman framework, while valuable for enterprise architecture, is insufficient on its own for security architecture implementation in a regulated U.S. environment. The Zachman framework is primarily a classification scheme for artifacts and perspectives, not a prescriptive methodology for security design or risk management. It lacks the specific guidance on cybersecurity controls and risk assessment that are essential for meeting regulatory compliance. Relying on it without integrating a security-specific framework would likely result in an architecture that is not demonstrably compliant with U.S. cybersecurity regulations, leading to potential legal penalties and ethical breaches. An approach that prioritizes the TOGAF framework without a strong security overlay also presents significant challenges. TOGAF is a comprehensive enterprise architecture framework, excellent for business process integration and IT architecture. However, its security aspects, while present, are often considered a component rather than the primary focus. Without dedicated security architecture principles and practices, an implementation based solely on TOGAF might overlook critical security requirements mandated by U.S. regulations, leading to compliance gaps and ethical shortcomings in protecting data. An approach that exclusively adopts CSA, while strong in security architecture, might be overly specialized if the organization requires a broader enterprise architecture context. CSA excels at defining security requirements based on business needs and risk. However, for a CSA operating within a U.S. regulatory framework, it's crucial to ensure that the CSA implementation is directly integrated with and demonstrably supports compliance with specific U.S. laws and standards. Without this explicit linkage, the architecture might be secure in principle but not demonstrably compliant in practice, failing to meet regulatory expectations and ethical obligations. The professional reasoning process for CSA in such a situation should involve 1. Understanding the organization's business objectives and risk appetite. 2. Thoroughly analyzing all applicable U.S. regulatory requirements and legal obligations. 3. Evaluating the strengths and weaknesses of various security architecture frameworks in relation to these objectives and requirements. 4. Selecting a primary framework or a combination of frameworks that provides a structured methodology for security architecture design and implementation. 5. Ensuring the chosen framework's outputs can be directly mapped to and demonstrate compliance with specific regulatory mandates. 6. Documenting the rationale for the framework selection and its implementation, including how it addresses identified risks and regulatory obligations. 7. Continuously reviewing and adapting the architecture and framework implementation to evolving threats and regulatory landscapes. Question 20. Market research demonstrates that organizations are increasingly adopting advanced network security solutions to meet evolving threat landscapes and regulatory demands. For a financial services firm operating under strict data protection mandates, which firewall design and implementation strategy would best align with the principles of robust security architecture and regulatory compliance, assuming the jurisdiction's regulations emphasize data integrity, confidentiality, and the prevention of unauthorized access. Option A. Deploy a stateless firewall that filters traffic based solely on IP addresses and port numbers, prioritizing maximum throughput. Option B. Utilize a next-generation firewall, NGFW, but disable its stateful inspection features to simplify management and reduce processing overhead. Option C. Install a basic packet filtering firewall that offers minimal security features but is known for its high performance. Option D. Implement a next-generation firewall, NGFW, with stateful inspection enabled, leveraging its application awareness and intrusion prevention capabilities to enforce granular security policies. The correct answer is D. Implement a next-generation firewall, NGFW, with stateful inspection enabled, leveraging its application awareness and intrusion prevention capabilities to enforce granular security policies. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing robust security architecture with the specific, often granular, regulatory requirements of the Certified Security Architect, CSA, exam's designated jurisdiction. The architect must not only understand the technical merits of different firewall technologies, but also how their implementation directly impacts compliance with applicable laws and guidelines. The core challenge lies in selecting a firewall strategy that provides the necessary security posture without introducing compliance risks or unnecessary complexity. The correct approach involves implementing a next-generation firewall, NGFW solution that incorporates stateful inspection capabilities. This is the best professional practice because NGFW offer advanced threat detection and prevention features beyond traditional packet filtering, such as application awareness, intrusion prevention systems (IPS), and deep packet inspection (DPI). Crucially, their stateful nature allows them to track the context of network connections, enabling more intelligent and granular policy enforcement. From a regulatory perspective, this aligns with the principle of defense in depth, often mandated or implied by security frameworks. For instance, Regulations requiring the protection of sensitive data, e.g., financial, health, personal identifiable information, necessitate a proactive and intelligent security posture that can identify and block sophisticated threats. A stateful NGFW provides the visibility and control required to meet these obligations by understanding the traffic flow and its potential malicious intent, rather than just examining individual packets in isolation. Implementing a purely stateless firewall is an incorrect approach because it fails to provide the necessary depth of inspection and context required by modern regulatory frameworks. Stateless firewalls examine each packet independently, without regard to the connection state. This makes them vulnerable to sophisticated attacks that exploit connection states or use fragmented packets, and they lack the application-level visibility needed to enforce policies based on specific services or user activities, which is often a regulatory expectation for data protection. Adopting a next-generation firewall, NGFW, without enabling its stateful inspection capabilities is also an incorrect approach. While the NGFW hardware itself offers advanced features, disabling stateful inspection negates a core security benefit and a key component for regulatory compliance. This would be akin to having a powerful tool but not using its primary function, leaving the network exposed to threats that stateful inspection is designed to mitigate. Regulatory bodies often expect organizations to leverage the full capabilities of their security investments to achieve compliance. Finally, implementing a firewall solution that prioritizes performance over security features, even if it offers some basic filtering, is an incorrect approach. Many regulations explicitly or implicitly require a risk-based approach to security, where the protection of assets and data is paramount. Sacrificing essential security functionalities like stateful inspection or advanced threat prevention for marginal performance gains would be a direct violation of the duty of care and could lead to significant compliance failures if a breach occurs due to inadequate security controls. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory landscape. This involves identifying specific requirements related to network security, data protection, and threat mitigation. Subsequently, they must assess the technical capabilities of various firewall solutions against these requirements, prioritizing those that offer stateful inspection and advanced threat prevention. The decision should be driven by a risk assessment that quantifies the potential impact of non-compliance and security breaches, ensuring that the chosen solution provides the most effective and compliant defense-in-depth strategy.